we'll call the November 29th special meeting agenda or special meeting of the Airport Commission here at Santa Barbara Airport to order, and can I get a roll call?
Karen Kahn, Kirk Martin, Craig R. Curry,
Here.
Carl Hopkins,
Here.
Dolores Johnson, Bruce Miller,
Here.
Jim Wilson.
Here.
Thank you very much. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Alrighty. So notices that on Monday, November 27th, 2017 at 5 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted the agenda on the bulletin board outside the front door. And next item, do we have any public comment on, actually, speaker slips? Did we collect the speaker slips?
Right, I do not have any speaker slips for any item that's not on the agenda.
Okay, so just verifying if anybody has anything to say there that's not on the agenda tonight. We'll need a quick speaker slip. Sounds like we don't have any. And next item is liaison reports. And first up is Councilmember Frank Hotchkiss, which I saw walk in the door.
Two quick things. It was a exceptionally dry summer, so we're lucky to have the desal plant coming on. And secondly, our mayor-elect has to be replaced in the city council. The probable way of doing that is as it was done last time, which is a determination of who are candidates that would like to apply and qualify, have to live in the district. That's pretty much it. Last time we had, when Randy Rouse was appointed, some 40 candidates, more actually, 46. This is a smaller deal because that wasn't districts then. This is by districts, actually. So my expectation is that rather than a 4-hour city council meeting, they'll have a pretty quick one because people will know in advance. It's a pretty monolithic new council. Well, as I suspect, have pretty much decided who they're going to have and will nominate them accordingly. But that will come the replacement has to be before the 10th of January or February. So pretty early on, that whole process will begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hotchkiss. And Galita, I think I saw Councilmember Michael Bennett. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Very quickly, I'd like to remind everyone that the second annual Goleta Holiday Parade will begin at 6 o'clock on Hollister Avenue on the 9th of December. And you're all welcome. We'd love to have you. And as just a passing comment, Hollister Avenue will be closed between Fairview and Kellogg. So you'll have to use alternative routes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Bennett. Hazel, just a point of order. Where in the agenda, because I don't see it down here, where in the agenda do we do the public comment on the agenda items?
When the item is brought before Airport Commission, so
Okay.
staff will do a presentation and then public comment speakers will speak to that item.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to consent calendar. First one is the minutes. We have a recommendation that and I'll just combine these, that the Airport Commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the commission meeting that was held on Wednesday, September 20th. Further, that the Airport Commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the lease review subcommittee work session meeting that happened Wednesday, November 15th. And finally, recommendation that the Airport Commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the General Aviation Subcommittee meeting of Monday, November 20th, 2017. So do I have a motion?
You could do all of them at once on consent.
Okay, well, we're not going to read through those. There is a bunch of them there.
I move the consent calendar be approved as stated.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Alrighty, all opposed? Nobody's opposed? Okay, the consent calendar is approved as stipulated.
You ready?
Next up, administrative reports. We have the lessor's consent for assignment of MAG Aviation Fuel. We have a recommendation before us that the Airport Commission recommend approval of MAG Fuel's request for consent of assignment of agreement number 201047 to Signature Flight Support of the self-serving fuel station at Santa Barbara Airport, which many of us use. The agreement provided for initial term of 5 years and one 5-year option. The option to extend was executed beginning April 7, 2015. The agreement will terminate on April 6th. So do we have a report on that, or is this just a?
Yes, Chair Curie, Deanna will do a presentation, and I do have speaker slips, which I'll bring to you.
Okay.
Alrighty, good
Yeah.
evening, Commissioners. This will be a somewhat short presentation because I do know that we have comment on this. But I first like to say I believe everyone here is aware of the self-fueling facility here at Santa Barbara Airport. For the benefit of folks who may watch this later and not know exactly what this is, we have a facility at the airport that is located in the northwesterly corner of the airfield, what we refer to as the Forest Service ramp. There are two kinds of fueling that are available for general aviation aircraft. There's obviously full service fueling through our fixed base operators, but we also have self-fueling facility here at the airport. And this particular facility was built by a company known as MAG Aviation in 2010. You can see here the tank that is surrounded by yellow pillars that protect anyone from intruding upon its space in any way. It has a 12,000 gallon fuel tank. The footprint is about 11,000 square feet. Originally, the term for this facility was 5 years, and the 5-year option was executed in April, I believe, of 2015. This lease or license will expire in 2020, so there is not much life left on this agreement. And it is generally understood that this facility is unfortunately in the pathway of the future Taxiway H expansion. So it will, as we understand it today, be relocated at that time. This facility has been purchased by Signature Flight Support. We know that MAG Aviation has had some interest in some time in finding a buyer for this facility. They maintain it remotely, come in and maintain it, and Signature has expressed an interest, obviously, and worked with them to come up with a purchase and sale agreement. As part of the lease, there is an assignment provision, so the lease can be assigned at the approval of the airport director. So with this sale, the self-fueling facility will be operated for the remainder of the agreement, which of course is not that long. There are some benefits to this sale, though, for the airport, and that is, of course, the fact that Signature is here on the field, and they have the ability to maintain the facility and actually have a greater vigilance of the facility on a day-to-day basis, which wasn't necessarily quite as straightforward with MAG. And of course, Signature, which they will talk to this, but much of the intent behind this was to put some price pressure on fuel prices for self-fueling and really improve the competitive fuel pricing picture as compared to MAG Aviation. So, and I do know that Signature will explain a little bit more about that. So, if you have any questions about the lease agreement or anything, it's actually fairly straightforward as far as how that works. Yep.
And do we have a presentation from Signature that we're, okay, got it. Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 speaker slips on this topic. And I'll just take them in the order I have them here. And let me get my phone set up. Please, please limit your time to 2 minutes so I don't have to wave at you. Julie Broderick.
Actually, could we defer to Matt Long first?
Sure. Sure. Matt Long. Have you guys kind of done this in order so you get more than 2 minutes, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. That's creative. Go ahead, Matt.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Chair Arcuri and Commissioners. As many of you know, my name is Matt Long. I'm the general manager for Signature here at the Santa Barbara Airport, and I have managed this location for the past decade. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this agenda item number 9 tonight. Regarding this assignment, Signature is excited to discuss what we bring to the equation that may not have been included in your staff report. Enhanced safety, quality, and service. From a safety and fuel quality perspective, Signature will provide immediate and future internal tank cleanings, high-level shutoff alarm installation utilized during tank loadings, installation of an inbound fuel filter to ensure that the fuel is filtered each and every time it moves in and out of that facility, installation of personal protective equipment for users such as gloves, safety glasses, wing mats, daily fuel quality inspections, in addition to monthly, quarterly, and annual inspections. Daily mechanical repair response, also to include a weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual preventative maintenance schedule. Multiple ladders to make self-fueling more convenient for the user. In terms of service, Signature will provide customer access on and off the airfield. Aircraft parking at Signature's Hangar 4 ramp for the day of fueling. And let me add, that is free parking. Immediate response to customer inquiries and issues. Maintain competitive pricing that self-service users have come to enjoy. And to address any pricing concerns, we have offered the following language to airport staff, which you each have a copy in front of you. Signature Flight Support will use commercially reasonably efforts to provide 100 low-lead fuel through its self-service facility at a price competitive with surrounding airports, providing similar 100 low-lead service at a minimum. Signature Flight Support will offer 100 low-lead through its self-service facility based upon the average published price of 100 low-lead at Santa Ynez, Lompoc, San Luis Obispo, and Santa Maria. Thank you.
Well timed. Thanks, Matt. Julie.
Thank you. I appreciate your consideration. Good evening. My name is Julie Broderick. I'm with Signature Flight Support. The sale of MAG to Signature makes good sense to the airport and its users. Please know that Signature Flight Support currently operates 13 and owns and operates 13 self-service facilities today throughout North America. And this would be number 14 and bring enhanced and balanced services to the airport. Again, our ownership will bring added public safety, enhanced fuel quality, public access on and off the airway or roadway system, and continued competitive pricing and sustainability. The assignment is beneficial to the airport as it allows for the preservation of the self-fueling facility while the airport finalizes its master plan and future developments. In closing, as the area director of Signature Flight Support, I can guarantee you that we will exceed all of your expectations and you will not be unhappy with our service. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie. Steve Americaner. Did I get the last name correct?
Pretty close.
Okay. We'll call it even.
I'm Steve Americaner, and I'm from the Brownstein Law Firm, and I represent Signature here tonight. I've been a lawyer here in town for the better part of 35 years. And there's only one comment I wanted to make, and that is to define the issue that's before the commission. As the staff reported, the lease that MAG has, and which it is proposing to assign to Signature, has a provision in it that allows MAG to assign the lease. It gives the city, specifically the airport director, the authority to consent to that assignment, and that consent cannot be unreasonably withheld. That's a fairly typical consent provision in a lease that allows for assignment of the lease. And so what is before you tonight is to ask the question whether or not there is any good reason to refuse the request of both MAG and Signature for the assignment of this lease. They have made their private arrangement satisfactory to both of these private parties, and the assignment and the consent to that assignment can only be withheld if there's a very good reason to do so. And I would suggest, based on what you've heard from your staff and from the Signature folks, that there is no good reason to do so, and so I would urge your recommendation to the airport director to sign the consent so that the assignment can go through. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Sean Sullivan.
Good evening. We have an objection to the purchase of MAG fuel by Signature, and we mean no offense to MAG and Gary, or Mitch and Gary and Matt, because Signature has been great to us. It's not that we don't want this to go through, because we do appreciate Signature. It's the manner in the exchange that we object to, because in December of 2016, last year, we had a deal in place with MAG fuel. I called up the airport to say, hey, we bought the fuel farm, the deal is going to go through, and we were told we could not purchase the MAG fuel. So imagine our surprise when we asked Hazel in a sit down, she said that because the airport administration, I'm not feeling well, had the first right of refusal with no further explanation. So imagine our surprise when we were A, not notified that the airport had not taken that first right of refusal, but B, that Signature was allowed to purchase it instead. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Okay, that's all we have for public comment. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Yeah.
In reading through it, my first concern was the conflict of interest in the pricing between self-serve and full service. I think that could be a real issue. However, we've received a memo from Signature Aviation over Matt Long's name, dated today, which resolves that issue with me. I would suggest that his memo be incorporated into the lease and attached to it.
I have a question. I'm sorry, go ahead, Bruce.
Oh, okay. Well, I wanted to start out by saying how much we really appreciate everything that MAG did to bring this facility, really a much-needed facility at that time, to the field, and it's really been very beneficial to the general aviation community. So we're really appreciative of that, and it is very unfortunate that the business conditions have changed such that it sounds as if it makes it rather impractical for them to continue. And we also understand there are certainly challenges to them operating that facility from outside of Hesperia, essentially, remotely. So I personally feel it's a real step forward to have Signature, or a local operator here, and certainly one that has expressed that they're committed to the highest level of service, and have given us a memo that they are going to take reasonable, commercially reasonable efforts to maintain competitive pricing. So again.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. So, yeah, just kind of dovetailing with Bruce's comments. So, I recognize that the lease assignment is, there has to kind of be a compelling reason not to, and I don't see that here. But, the promises of great service, those are futures, and we won't really be able to judge the performance to those until we're well into it. And so I know we'll all be paying attention to that. But Deanna specifically, do I understand this correct, that the initial 5-year lease terminates on April 6, 2020? Is that correct?
Actually, it was a 5-year agreement with one 5-year option, and that option was exercised, so therefore it would expire in 2020.
And that's the end of the 5-year
That is
option.
the end of it, yes.
And how does that, remind me, how does that line up with the expiration of everything else here? That's, what, about a year later?
Well, yeah, I mean, the timing mostly is with Taxiway Hotel, obviously. That's one of the bigger drivers as to
Right.
when that aligns with. But we have a lot of things, it's correct, we have a lot of things that are expiring more or less in that same time frame.
Okay. Do you feel, you know, in the conversations you've had or the kind of due diligence you've done, are you satisfied with the service commitment? And I know I'm sure I speak for the worries of the GA community that you know, big companies are not bad, but they're also big companies. So the fear is probably that, you know, oh gosh, all these great words, but a year from now the fuel's going to be, you know, $8 a gallon, and I know that's not realistic. But have airport staff satisfied themselves to the extent that you can, that you feel that those interests will be protected in terms of the, you know, the most aggressive fuel price we can do with self-serve?
I certainly do.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions. Anybody else?
I'll move that we approve.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody's opposed? Nope. Okay. On to number 10. A subject near and dear to many of our hearts. Revisions to the minimum standards of aeronautical activities at Santa Barbara Airport. And we don't have a presentation on this, is that correct? Or do, oh, we do, Tom, okay. So just by way of background, the General Aviation Subcommittee met 4 times on this subject with stakeholders, and after a great deal of comment and conversation and work, hammered out a revision to the minimum standards, and I believe, Tom, you're going to make a presentation on that now. Thank you.
Good evening, Airport Commissioners. I'm going to talk a little bit about the minimum standards, as Commissioner Curry mentioned. So just a quick outline of the presentation. We're going to go over what minimum standards are, and then the process that we followed to date. Talk a little bit about what the actual revisions are. We made revisions to 3 articles, and then the next steps and recommendation. So minimum standards are just that. They're minimum qualifications that somebody who wants to provide commercial aeronautical services at the airport needs to meet. It establishes a base level of service, and ensures fair and reasonable standards, provides a way to evaluate requests for new services at the airport, and they're typically developed by the airport sponsor, in this case the Santa Barbara Airport. A few benefits: they promote safety, protect airport users, enhance the availability of services, and promote orderly development at the airport. They're also guided by a lot of different agencies, but those include the city and the city's municipal code, and the FAA with via regulations, grant assurances, and advisory circulars. So in terms of some of those important city requirements, and the Airport Municipal Code says that any person engaging in business or commercial activities must have a prior agreement with the City of Santa Barbara before they start doing that activity. And this is also reflected in the minimum standards, section 3.1. The FAA encourages airports to develop and publish their minimum standards. This is especially important to comply with grant assurances. 2 of those important ones that the minimum standards help you comply with are economic non-discrimination and exclusive rights prohibition. And the grant assurances are really important for the airport. As a condition of grant acceptance, we have to meet these grant assurances. And just to put that into context, we receive about $2.7 to $3 million annually. The AIP program has a really favorable grant match, 91% funded by the federal government, 9% funded by local user fees and rents. And just a few examples of some recent AIP grant projects: the airfield electrical rehab of the parallels, and the upcoming runway 725 overlay project. So in terms of the process, the FAA updated or published a final policy amending the airport compliance manual. It had three main points related to flying clubs: that they should not hold themselves out as businesses, that flight instructors and mechanics could receive compensation or club member dues, and that flying clubs couldn't indicate in their marketing that they're a business where people can learn to fly. In response, the airport undertook a revision of these minimum standards, held public meetings, 3 public meetings in April, May, and September, accepted written comments following a couple of the meetings in May and September. So in terms of the actual revisions that are proposed in Article 2, the definitions, a fixed place of business is only occupied by a lease agreement. We aligned the flying club definition with the FAA new policy. Created a ground school definition and tied it to the federal aviation regulations related to the written requirements for pilot certification. Included some language from the FAA Airport Compliance Manual under lease agreement. Created some definitions for lessee, a license agreement, and a licensee. And removed a licensee from a long definition that was related to operators, permittees, or tenants. In terms of Article 8, independent operators, we removed the word lease from independent operators since they don't operate under a lease agreement. They operate under a permit agreement. We required a flight instructor to have the appropriate FAA certifications for flight instruction. Require permission from a lessee to operate on its premises, including the city-owned T-hangars or tie-downs. Prohibited ground school activities in the AOA unless certain conditions were met. Defined what an independent aircraft detailer or washer was, and included some of the same permissions that an independent flight instructor had to meet in terms of getting permission from a lessee to operate on their premises. And finally, we created a temporary independent operator classification for limited term, specialized flight instruction or washing and detailing needs. For Article 10, non-commercial activities, we're really talking about flying clubs here, and just what is a flying club kind of compared to some of the other general airport owners on the airport, or aircraft owners. A flying club is a legal nonprofit. Its corporate or partnership documents must identify that purpose and intent to operate as a flying club. There's equal property rights for the flying club members, and the ownership of the aircraft has to be vested in the club name or owned by all its members. So we updated the language for this section using the airport compliance manual, the updates from the flying club order, and the existing minimum standards. Again, some of those key points, the flying clubs may not hold themselves out as a business offering services to the public or market themselves as businesses where people can learn to fly. And members who are flying instructors may receive compensation from other flying club members, flying instructors or mechanics. We also wanted to address fees and AOA badging. These are not included in the minimum standards, but to just kind of provide a broader picture of some of the changes we were looking at. So in terms of fees, again, these are not included in the minimum standards. They haven't been increased since 2005, so about a 3% per year increase since that time would lead to the proposed fees on the right-hand column. We also proposed to index this to a CPI with caps between 3% and 8%, and this is really similar to a lot of our other leases at the airport. And badging, again, not included in the minimum standards, but we permitted independent flight instructors who have a permit with the airport may be able to receive badges. In terms of the next steps, we're going to be asking the Commission tonight for a recommendation to the City Council. The GA subcommittee met on November 20th and recommended that the Airport Commission recommend the minimum standards to the Airport Commission. And after this, we would seek to go to City Council and have it adopted by City Council. So with that, our recommendation would be to recommend approval of revisions to the specific sections of the minimum standards of aeronautical activities at the Santa Barbara Airport, The revisions specifically address Article 2, definitions, Article 8, independent operators, and Article 10, non-commercial activities. With that, I'll take any questions.
A quick question on the rates, which, as I understand it, are really independent from our action tonight. So those rates will come around with our rate setting and be approved at that time. Is that correct? Will there be an opportunity to review those and approve those rates?
Commissioner Miller, yes, we could bring it back to Airport Commission for rates. There are some other aviation rates that we'd like to add to our list.
Okay.
Historically, you know, we've done commercial industrial property and land rental, but we feel the need for adding retail aviation, and certainly these would be included in that. So I would think early part of the year, new year, we could bring that back to commission.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't conflating the rate issue with the minimum standards update, and I'd be interested in getting a little more depth into what precisely those rates cover and what they're intended to cost they're intended to recover and so forth. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anybody else?
Yes, Karen Khan, the commissioner and chair, is unable to be here tonight, but she did give me a letter and asked me to express her points. One was the fees. She supports the fees as written. The matter of badging for the independent operators, she supports as written. And for the flying club changes here, she supports as written, as do I.
Anybody else?
I don't have any further questions. Do we have public comment on this?
I don't believe we do.
Then I
don't have
after-
any speaker slips.
Then,
Oh,
then I, after four, oh.
Oh, I apologize.
sorry, I didn't see that.
Okay, I only see, oh, I see. Well, I only see 9 here, but I see MSR down there. Okay, go ahead. Sean, you got your 2 minutes.
Again, I'm Sean. We have, I'm going to read this verbatim because I can't think straight right now. First off, item 10 in the latest revision of the MSR is a flight school killer in its current form. Article 8, independent flight instructors, which invites independent operators who can advertise as they wish, collaborate with local flying clubs, non-leasees, and creating an alternative to paying rent. MSR compliant flight training for a fraction of 1% of what it costs a flight school to operate on this field. And by the way, the local clubs and independents have made it clear during the GA subcommittees that this is exactly their intent, to run schools, even though they can't advertise. Article 10, non-commercial activities, which hands out unlimited commercial activity of providing flight instruction to every non-leasee, non-commercial operator flying club at no fee, while schools, again, pay exorbitant rent and comply with expensive MSR requirements. It is our belief that should these MSRs go through, this will not just put our flight school at risk, but all the small businesses, including maintenance facilities, on this field, as those airports, as well as airports around the country. Bob Rockemaker, he's the president of FASANA, which is the Flight Schools of North America, sent me a letter this morning. It says, "Good morning, Sean. Thank you for including FASANA with this latest information on the flying club matter at the Santa Barbara Airport. The FAA has clear policy on this matter, and we expect that the airport sponsor will adhere to the current policy guidance. Deviations from the current FAA guidance will compromise and create a negative impact for the profit flight training businesses at the Santa Barbara Airport. FASANA remains supportive on this matter and believes that this matter has high impact outcomes which will create additional hardship for profit flight training providers at both Santa Barbara Airport and potentially all flight training providers across the United States." At this point, I asked the airport administrators, the commission, and to sit down with the AOPA Government Affairs Representative Bill Dunn, FAA Regional Director Brian Anderson, and the president of FASANA, Bob Rockemaker. I don't think any of us that were on the subcommittee can remain neutral or not self-serving. Until such a time, I ask that the proposed MSR draft be stricken from the Airport Commission meeting agenda tonight and tabled for another date.
Can I ask airport staff if they have reason to believe that that anything in these updates is contrary to the FAA guidance?
I'll have Tom speak to that, but as far as I can recall, we literally picked up the federal regulations and replaced them in the minimum standards. We didn't, we perhaps added a little bit more information for flying clubs than FAA required, but the language that is in there is federal regulation. It's not airport generated. Tom?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what Hazel said. A lot of the language we literally took from the airport compliance manual, the new FAA policy, and dumped it into the minimum standards. And then also used some of our current language from the current minimum standards.
Okay, well, let me ask then, in light of it seeming like there's still some controversy on this and some what sound to be serious concerns, is there a compelling reason that would make it unreasonable to not have a consultation with AOPA or other bodies such as the FAA on this? Is that a reasonable request?
May I comment on that?
Please.
I've had conversations with FAA and with Bill Dunn at AOPA, and I've also been involved in all 4 of the meetings, as well as a separate meeting that Karen Kahn and I attended at the Flying Club. I've also talked to Above All Aviation Sean concerning these, and I'm fully supportive of them as they are written. I think that they are fully supported by what the current FAA regulations say. I frankly don't see any reason to delay them. It's been since, what did it start in May? April, May. So therefore I would recommend that we proceed and approve them. Like all regulations, they are subject to future change should conditions indicate problems, but right now they comply, I believe, with what the FAA has, whether it's good or bad, they comply with what the FAA has stated and what their intent was, and also with what AOPA's was, because they were the organization that suggested these changes. So at any point, I'm ready to move approval.
Thank you for that input.
Yeah, in reading through it, I came up with a full page of questions, which I dumped on Hazel late this afternoon, and my apologies for the short notice. And she responded very promptly to them, resolving the questions in my mind, and it seems like a rational move.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I move we approve as written.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next, number. Well, do we have a report or a administrative report on 11 and 12 or 11?
Yes, we do.
So we have one for 11 and one for 12, or are they kind of combined?
I think she's combined them, but
Okay.
we have the speaker slips.
Okay. So sounds like we're going to tackle 11 and 12 together since
Yes.
they're tightly related. We do have speaker slips, and so after the administrative report, we'll get to the speaker slips.
Excellent. Good evening again, Commissioners. Yes, this is a consolidated presentation, much for the reason that it serves as an update as well in our process to redevelop the FBO business that we've been talking about for a number of months now. I have a couple of slides in here that are going to be somewhat repetitive for most of us in the room, but for those who are uninitiated in what a fixed-based operator is, they are a private company that has been granted rights to operate at an airport and provide essential airfield services to general aviation. That's charter, aviation, fueling as well is a big component for general aviation and commercial airlines. And like anything else at the airport is regulated by the airport and the FAA. Fixed base operators here in Santa Barbara, which of course we have two, are an essential component to the service that we provide the community here. So we have two, both are represented here this evening, Atlantic and Signature Flight Support. Both have been on the field for some time, quite some time. Both operate terminals and fueling, storage of aircraft, aircraft maintenance. They're quite different, however, in the sense that one has a much larger leasehold than the other, combined about 32 acres, but square footage-wise, I think Signature is at about 900,000 square feet, and Atlantic is less than half of that, so disproportionate in size. And here you can actually see that illustrated. This is a great illustration to show Signature's leasehold is in the northerly part of the airfield, and Atlantic is in the southeastern corner of the airfield. Which leads us, of course, to the whole reason for the redevelopment of the FBO business is tied intrinsically to the master plan. So they are very much a dovetailed matter for us to work our way through. And we've talked a number of times about what we call the pink blobs. But they are pink areas that are designated here equal in size on the northeast corner of the airfield that will be designated for the future development of the FBO facilities. So this process is something that we do not take lightly by any means. It's very, very important to the airport. Revenue stream-wise, obviously critical to the airport. And so as part of this process that we've been discussing now over a number of months, one of the first steps that we wanted to take was engage in third-party industry expertise specific to aviation and FBO development facilities. So as part of that, we issued an RFQ earlier this year to try to bring on board a consultant expertise that could help us with that. Part of that process, though, once we have done that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, key upfront activity for us is to solicit input from stakeholders. That's the community at large, but also the FBO community specifically, and complete a market analysis of really what the potential is for the FBO business here in Santa Barbara today. We obviously need to scope the redevelopment. They cannot remain pink blobs. It needs to be more refined than that, and that is going to take a lot of consideration, and I'm sure there will be multiple iterations of what that could possibly look like. Then we really move into the competitive process, and that is developing the RFP documents, request for proposal documents, for potential bidders to propose and establish those selection criteria so that we can make a knowledgeable choice, but also a choice that is clearly spelled out what the criteria for that choice is, to take as much of a lack of arbitrary decision making out of that. So the next part after that, of course, is going through that process, and probably the RFP will be out on the street for a number of months for proposers to craft their proposals. We'll complete that process and negotiate leases. So this is a process that is going to take some time. I think we've all talked about that. And here's where we are today. We have selected that consultant to help us. It's Lee Fisher and Associates. They are really an industry leader in aviation. They have worked here in Santa Barbara before, and they are on board with helping us develop that thoughtful and deliberate strategy that we need to get us from point A to point B most directly. This process is planned now coming up starting next year. And really that first phase of it is that market assessment and engaging with stakeholders. That's the top of our list of priorities. And now we had a little bit of a complication to this, and that is that we have two current FBOs that are providing service. And it's very important to us that we're able to focus on the redevelopment process and not upsetting the current operation. Status quo so that we can focus on our main objective, which is to run a good process. So those leases are expiring in May. That becomes problematic for us because we can't do anything well in that short period of time. So, also part of this whole process is having the capability to phase this development, and that really is tied to the the ampersand hangar on the east side of the airfield, which we now refer to as 495 South Fairview, which is also coming back to the airport on time. So the solution for us, and we've talked about this for a number of months, is to do a short-term lease extension for the FBOs, the 2 current FBOs. And we think in order to do this process, do it well, 2 years in our airport world will be a blip in time. I think we've all been in airport management long enough to know that things do take time, particularly if you want to do it well, which we do. That's the most important thing to us. With these lease extensions, we are maintaining the right to recover premises if we should need to. So there's some flexibility built into this. Primarily, we wanted to make sure that we have lease agreements in place, so there's stability on both sides for the airport and the operators, as opposed to sort of a month-to-month situation. And we've increased the rent. And I think you'll see, and I'm sure will be discussed, is that the rent increase is of a larger magnitude for Signature than it is for Atlantic. And that's something that we very carefully considered. And really, that is tied to the fact that the Atlantic leasehold is much smaller and much more constrained. And we have to recognize that the revenue potential for that leasehold is not as great. So that's the background to that. In these lease extensions as well, there is some new language that we needed to incorporate, primarily non-discrimination language. The FAA doesn't change that all that much, but they recently did change quite a bit of that language, and we've incorporated that into these lease amendments. So I can take any questions at this point. I know we do have a number of folks that would like to comment, so I don't want to steal their time.
Questions? I've got a few. Remind us when 495 Fairview comes back to us. That's a date that should be burned into our memory.
May 9, 2018.
May 9, 2018. Okay. And that's approximately a year prior to these proposed lease extensions. Roughly.
May 9, 2018. I'm sorry, didn't I say 18?
Yeah,
18.
18.
Oops, thank you. So it comes back to us
Next
in about
May.
6 months.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
As we know, there's a fair amount of work that needs to be done in that facility, so.
I'm very well aware of that. Okay. The consultant that we've hired, Lee Fisher, is it Lehigh Fisher? Lee Fisher?
Lee Fisher Associates.
So we
yes.
worked with them in the past. What projects did we work on?
Lee Fisher assisted us years ago with the RFP process that we undertook for concessions in the terminal. They also provided the financial feasibility as part of our bond issue for the terminal.
Okay. And so presumably over the course of this next couple of years, we're going to be hearing from them or reports, one or more
Yes,
reports from
we
those
haven't
folks.
quite executed that agreement yet, but we are working on developing the scope for that right now, so that's imminent.
Got it. And I think you used the words reclaim the premises. What does that mean?
That language is in Atlantic's lease and has been, so we maintained that. And we have reclaimed, under their current agreement, we reclaimed land when the terminal was opened to provide space for the rent-a-car storage, the ready return cars at the terminal. We took back a portion. So when that lease was developed, it had different parcels identified. All we're doing is we're not changing that lease. We're just, that portion of the lease, we're continuing that.
So that just, that addition to a lease basically gives us the ability to say, well, for this last period of time you had this much, but sorry, we need this back, and we're going to carve that out without renegotiating the whole thing.
Right.
Doesn't seem like it get a whole lot smaller over there, but.
Well, I think the primary concern that we've talked about before is the terminal parking situation. And
Right.
of course, we don't have a crystal ball, but we do know that we are filling up our parking lots at the terminal
We
very
are.
quickly at the holidays. So that is an eventuality that we have to keep into consideration.
Okay.
I'm sorry, so were those reclamation terms put into the signature lease, or did they already exist in there?
They're not in the signature lease. We maintained the body of the lease agreements with the exception of the additions that we're talking about. Atlantic was the only lease that had that. And we did it because of the terminal and because of the terminal development.
Okay, so that language was not added to the signature lease?
No, it was
Okay.
not.
Then I had one more. Has the lease subcommittee been involved in this process, or has this been purely an administrative process?
We did bring to lease review subcommittee the discussion that we would be extending the leases with the FBOs. The particulars of the leases were not brought to lease review subcommittee.
Okay. Okay.
It's been kind of difficult getting committees together.
Right. Understood. Okay, that was some of my questions. Did any other commissioners, before we get to public comment?
Questions?
No.
Okay, so we've got a bunch of public comment on this. So again, I want to remind everybody, 2 minutes. I see some numbers here. I'll do them in order. I'm sure that's, so we can have a continuous conversation, that's fine. But at 2 minutes, I'll make, a little bit of a sign to you, and then you got another 5 or 10 seconds, and then please wrap it up. So we'll start with Kurt Castanaga. Hi, Kurt.
Hello. Good evening, Chair Curry and members of the commission and staff. Good evening. Thank you for letting me address you tonight, and congratulations on what looks like an evolving airport. My name is Kurt Castagna, and I'm the president of the Aeroplex Aerolease Group. I'm here to speak on behalf of Signature Flight Support as one of their consultants, but really I think my words will be here to endorse both FBOs with what you're deciding tonight. I encourage you to support items 11 and 12, and I want to tell you the reasons why I think your actions are consistent with best management practices and airport leasing standards. Before I tell you, I want to tell you I'm a 20-year business partner of Signatures in multiple locations. I'm proud to be helping them. I know firsthand their integrity, their operational service quality, and their excellence. Our firm has assisted airports as well on the public side with business plans, development plans, property management, leasing policies, FBO consulting, etc. We've also developed over 500,000 square feet of our own at airports in Southern California. I'm a member of the board of directors of the National Air Transportation Association, the NATA in Washington, who represents FBO and charter aircraft companies nationally. And finally, I'm also a member of the Los Angeles County Airport Commission, overseeing their 5 general aviation airports. Based on my experience, I believe the staff recommendations here tonight are consistent with industry best practices, FAA policy, and do provide the city of Santa Barbara and the airport with an opportunity to maintain a balance of operations at their airport that will maintain safety for its users and security for its users. Not only will a 2-year extension of the current leases provide the city of Santa Barbara with the ability to complete its general aviation master plan, but more importantly, such approval will provide stability and continuity with known professional firms committed to supporting their community. It's more than reasonable but necessary that the airport provide this 2-year extension of the existing leases while completing a deliberative and analytical evaluation and procurement process that will provide for a fair and transparent process for the interested FBOs to compete in. This process will result in providing the highest quality of general aviation services from companies that have the requisite operational experience, expertise, resources, and financial strength. Just give me 1 second. To not approve this would preempt a reasonable process and instill and create unpredictability that would unfortunately be negative for all the airport users, base tenants, and itinerant visitors. Interim 2-year leases will preserve economic conditions. I ask you that you approve items 11 and 12 in order to secure the airport's continuity, stability, and predictability.
Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you. And please don't be swayed by those wanting to score a touchdown before the kickoff.
Matt.
Well, I'll make this short and sweet. Hello again, Chair Curry, Commissioners. I wanted to communicate that Signature supports airport staff's recommendation to extend these leases to provide continuity and stability while the airport staff secures master plan approval, the ability to conduct public planning meetings, and develop a fair and well-planned RFQ and RFP process. That is all. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. We'll, yeah, you did. Yeah, I was thinking that exactly that. Mr. McBride.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bill McBride. For those that don't know me, I'm the owner, along with Kim, our general manager of Coastal Aircraft Maintenance on the field. And we've been a long-term, now 8 years, I guess, subtenant under Signature, and have had a very good working relationship with them. We now employ about 20 employees. The majority of them are mechanics. We do all the turbine work on the field. We do some general aviation. But we do 2 other functions. We do all the work for the airlines on the field, which we're happy to see growing quite significantly, so we're getting a lot of call-outs on that. We store a number of their equipment and parts at our location. And as you might imagine, we need to create a little bit more certainty with our investment strategy for our business, with investments with our employees, that we're here long-term. And we've been really operating month to month to month until we can get to the point, hopefully under the master plan, and hopefully we'll have some dialogue with the consultant here as a long-term maintenance provider. We have a pretty good sense of what this airport needs from a maintenance facility. But we'd like to see that extended out for the longest period of time possible, and so we can continue doing the services that we've been doing for a number of years on the field. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Max, Mad Max.
Hello, I'm Max Rosenberg, owner of Santa Barbara Aviation, and thank you for all you guys' hard work with this master plan moving forward. A lot of work. And my comments really fall in line with Bill's, in that being a service provider here at Santa Barbara Airport, Signature, and having done business with Atlantic here and at other airports, very consistent FBO network. And all I can really emphasize is that as a stakeholder here at Santa Barbara Airport, I think it's really important that we keep a consistent business environment moving forward. So I welcome another 2-year extension on this, just to keep things stable and status quo. So I really don't have a whole lot of input on any other aspect of it, other than I really appreciate the consistency. Signature has been a delight to work with, and so is Atlantic. So just like to see everything stay nice and calm, and let's get on to the next phase, the next 20 years.
Thanks, Max. Steve Americaner, McConnor, I'm sorry.
Just, if I may not need to speak at all. If I could speak later on in the process, I'm here just to respond to any legal issues that may be presented to the commission by others. So,
well, as you know, it's kind of a one-way conversation for the speaker slip. So are you saying that you'd like to pass on this one?
if I could come back later if necessary, maybe it won't be necessary. You'll say.
Okay, I'll put you off to the side there, and we'll give you the first right of refusal and an option to use it. Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Joe. Thanks, Joe. How do you pronounce your last name?
It's a tough one.
Dashant.
Yes.
Okay, Joe. Please help me with the 2 minutes there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'll wait for the nod and end it right away. Members of the Airport Commission, it's a privilege to be here. My name is Joe Dashant. I'm General Manager with ACI Jet at John Wayne Airport in Orange County. I'm myself a pilot that learned to fly 10 years ago. A little bit later in life, I now have 2,000 hours. I fly everything from piston to turbine aircraft, and have used it for business expansion. It's a great privilege to operate in the airspace and operate in the airports that we have in our country. John Wayne is a different story than what we're hearing tonight. Signature Aviation left the facility in a dilapidated condition, and I had a unique privilege to take that and do a conversion, a remodel of the facility. As business was chased out, we brought in $250 million of new aircraft. We cut the fuel prices in half. And so there's been so many positive things that have happened. So many folks and businesses that I'd like to be able to bring before you and share the heartache that they went through until Orange County made a big change at John Wayne Airport. So fuel prices, I understand that there's changes happening right now with the fuel farm. But I think it's best said by one of Signature's own employees. When the response came a few months ago and their fuel prices dropped here for 100 low lead, a significant drop, the question was asked by a pilot, why is that? And the ramper responded, it's the John Wayne jitters. So it's a great thing to see fuel prices dropping. It's a great thing to see improvements in investment underway, but don't stop here. So I would encourage you not to extend these leases and to open up as soon as possible the RFP process and move with all haste towards it. There's a consultant that's on board now and a subcommittee that could have looked at. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the
Go
time.
ahead and take another 5 seconds.
Last 5 seconds. I was going to say, I think looking at the experts of a subcommittee and the consultant to look at this process and the timing and make sure a decision tonight doesn't harm the years to come. Thank you very much.
Mr. Borgsmiller.
Staff, members of the commission, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Bill Borgsmiller. I'm the CEO of ACI Jet. We're one of the FBOs that is extremely excited about this RFP process coming up. I think it's going to be amazing for Santa Barbara to have the chance to make some much needed, in my opinion, change. But I don't know that you necessarily need to extend the leases for 2 years the way proposed. Right now, the current timeline we're looking at shows a decision being made in late 2018 potentially. And I don't know that it's necessary to handcuff the city into another 18 months beyond that if the commission should select somebody other than the incumbents. It seems like the city should have the ability to decide how that transition plays out however it wants without having to wait out another 18 or 20 month period. So I understand staff's desire to have some stability in a process, and I know there's a rent increase that comes as part of it, but the reality is the lease is designed to end and go into a month-to-month status after that. So I would sincerely suggest that you guys consider a 1-year extension, which puts the end of the extension about the time that a decision is anticipated to be made. And then the city has the freedom to decide when and how it wants to transition after a decision's made, should there be a change. I know there's maybe some concern about stability, so this is not an attempt to score a touchdown before the game starts, but I did want to present a proposal merely to make a point, not because I expect you guys to accept it, but we're submitting a proposal that simply says we would assume any of the leases as is, pay 20% more than the proposed lease increase, and do it just on a month-to-month basis. Not because I expect you to accept that proposal. I understand you're working through your process, but just to point out the level of interest that is there in this airport, and I assure you that any of the other bidders would be willing and able to do that as well, in addition to ACI Jet. So I don't think you need to worry about people wanting to be here. The incumbents will stay here, and they will try to demonstrate the best service and everything they can in the remaining time as the RFP folds out. I think a reasonable course of action would be a 1-year extension, and I would implore you to consider that because it coincides with when you expect the decision to be made. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. And last but not least, Brianne from Atlantic. Well, there you are. We just got a new puppy, I heard.
He's in the car. I feel really bad. Good evening, commissioners. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the general manager at Atlantic Aviation. I've had the pleasure of working with Atlantic, formerly Mercury Air Center, for 14 years. I, along with my 20 team members, appreciate the opportunity to serve the general aviation community here at the Santa Barbara Airport. I became general manager last April. Not sure if I should admit this, but it was never the job. Never a job I thought I would be interested in, but I've been pleasantly surprised at how much I've enjoyed myself in this new position. My background with the company has been with customer service for 13 years, and now that I'm GM, I've been able to implement a lot of changes that I thought would create not only a better work environment for all employees, but a better overall experience for the customers flying in. Being on the airfield since 2003, I have had a lot of time to get to know our customers, and most have become family to me. And with that being said, they have no problem coming to me anytime there's any issues or complaints, something they don't agree with. And one thing I pride myself in is really listening to their complaints and their praises, and finding a way to address them immediately. I never want to hear the same complaint twice. If I do so, I'm not doing my job, and that's not an option for me. Before I get off topic, I want to add that we at Atlantic understand and take serious the role we play in representing the airport and our community. As often we are first and last contact a visitor has in the Santa Barbara area. We not only work hard to please the visitors coming in, but we also work within the community and are involved with different organizations such as Girls Inc. of Greater Santa Barbara, United Way. We actually received the Outstanding New Philanthropic Partner this year at their event held in May. We also contribute to Santa Barbara Museum of Art, Santa Barbara Crisis Center, to name a few others. With all of that being said, we look forward to continuing to provide the airport and the general aviation community with the professional service they deserve. Thank you for your support and your time here this evening.
Thanks, Brianne. Down to the option.
I'll take 1 minute of my 2 minutes.
Okay. Come on up so we can get you on camera.
All right.
And that's Steve Americaner.
Very good.
Connor.
Well done.
That was close.
Close enough.
Closer.
On Deanna's slides, she had something that I wrote down. Talked about a thoughtful and deliberate strategy. Seems to me that's what you're engaged in. And as I understand the schedule that the staff has laid out, the decision about which companies will get the FBOs, these 2 FBO sites on a long-term basis, is going to be made about 2 years from now. One of the things that undercuts a thoughtful and deliberate strategy is a sense of being rushed, is a sense of pressure. And I think that the suggestion for a 2-year extension of a lease that has been around for decades, prior to making another decision that's going to last for decades, gives you the time to make that thoughtful and deliberate decision. And I would urge you to accept the schedule that the staff has recommended and approve the 2-year extensions that are before you. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, that's all the speaker slips. Does that generate?
I did have a question and some comments. So one of our representatives from Atlantic voiced a concern about the 1-year versus 2-year. Was that a subject of discussion during your negotiations on the lease renewal, or is that a?
It was ACI.
No? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we had a representative from Atlantic. Okay, I will dispense with that question. Yeah, I did want to say, you know, it's really gratifying to see such interest from premier operators being here on the airfield. You know, we're really fortunate, as there are a lot of desolate airports out in the world. So it's really gratifying to see all that interest. I'd also like to say, as you know, many of us are small GA light, small aircraft pilots. We have the advantage of taking advantage of a lot of these FBO facilities around the country, and a lot of very fine facilities out there. And it's I know amongst small plane owners and pilots, it's sometimes easy to kind of look at these and think about, well, gosh, you know, it's the fuel prices are high or the ramp fees are high. And then you're reminded when you look at the large amounts of ramp that many of these providers have to hold down, and the annual expenses of providing those resources, that rental, that infrastructure, that they have a lot to recover in their business model. So, you know, I think it is easy to kind of think about the fuel prices without seeing their side of the equation. I would just have to say I really appreciate the great things we've heard about our FBOs here. And I personally can't imagine the chaos of throwing these leases out on such short order when we're just two years away from the new plan. And I know we're always very optimistic about how quickly things will go, but I've been involved in enough really large projects over the years to know that everything always takes at least twice, if not 5 times longer than we think it's going to take. So, yeah, I, as I said, I can't imagine not doing this right now. just because of the stability that we need at this point, and we don't need a lot of distractions and throwing things up in the air.
This 2-year extension buys stability for the airport and the fixed base operators while we do our planning. And at the rate that the wheels of change grind in Santa Barbara, 2 years is not too long.
When did the master plan start?
I believe that was 2000, was before Karen retired. 2012, maybe 2011. I think we started in 2011.
6 years ago.
About that time.
That was when I first became involved with the Airport Commission and the airport staff. And if you'd asked me 6 years ago if the master plan would not yet be approved, or the EIR not yet certified, or lawsuits going on against them, I either would have laughed at you or shot myself, one or the other. But I realize, having been involved in this for this length of time, that the wheels do move very slowly. The downside is they move slowly. The upside is that at least the vast majority of the time, the result is well worth the wait. 2 years is, to me, perfectly reasonable. Let's hope we get it done in 2 years.
2 questions. The the rent increase for Signature. So I know with all the property here, we kind of follow guidelines. Are those increases which you stated were, you know, not proportional with Atlantic as a result of the, you know, kind of usability of the Signature facility versus Atlantic? Can you give a little bit more background on that, kind of how you arrived at those numbers?
Excuse me. Signature Flight Support has, as you saw in the documents before you, almost 1 million square feet in land. They have 116,000 square feet in building square footage. They have 12 buildings and 4 large hangars. Compare that to Atlantic, that has about 430,000 square feet of land and 21,000 square feet in building size. The rest of their facilities, they have 3 small buildings, and then they have the 19 porta-ports that have been moved on the airport 4 times in my tenure. So they're not comparable. The 2 facilities are different, and we took that into consideration when we recommended the increase in the rent.
Okay. Well, I didn't hear a Signature complain, so, or at least I didn't. And then is there a provision, you know, I agree. I mean, I've been involved in this process now for some time, and I know it takes a long time, and there's a lot of, I mean, we still have an active lawsuit, as I understand. So, but in the unlikely event of a water landing, and in the unlikely event that this process for the redevelopment takes longer than 2 years, what provisions, I suppose we would revisit this at that point. So I agree that the stability is important, and I agree that giving these businesses who have been here for a lot of years some, you know, some horizon that's farther than 30 days in advance. And I think that lines up realistically with the process that we're going to have to go through. What if it takes longer?
Should it take longer than 2 years? The agreements that we have in place, both existing agreements have holdover provisions. And those holdover provisions would allow an increase in the rent, and then they would go month to month.
Okay, I don't have any other questions.
So in sort of the converse case of that, if the stars lined up just right and we were able to conclude the RFP process, say, in 18 months, I would assume that whoever won, you know, in that process isn't going to just be able to come in on day one and pick up with those facilities. There's really, the whole intent is to redevelop.
Correct.
So there's a lengthy process going on there. during which time I would suppose that the current tenant, if we were all done and awarded stuff in 18 months, the current tenant wouldn't, there would be no reason for the current tenants to be needing to be moved out prior to 2 years. I guess it's in a long way of asking, well, is there any even conceivable scenario where we would need those tenants out prior to 2 years? And if that was the case, are there provisions to allow the airport to terminate those leases for basically its convenience or the need to retake that land?
I'll turn it over to Deanna. As far as I know, there's not a provision that allows us to take back the space unless they're in default.
Well, I should say that we are confident, of course, that it is going to take us that amount of time at least to complete the process. But admittedly, there is a lot of uncertainty about the transition phase. And that's something that we will need to work with Lee Fisher very closely on, because there is an operational aspect to it. There's a developmental aspect to it. Sure. We are obviously getting the access to the large hangar. So there's a lot of moving parts in that time frame as to how we could make that transition take place.
Well, I guess another way of asking it is there any scenario under which granting these 2-year leases would impede progress in moving forward with that? And it sounds like the answer is no.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no other questions,
Well, with that answer, I would make a motion to approve.
Okay,
And I would second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll approve
For
that.
clarification, that's for items 11 and 12.
11 and 12. Correct. Alrighty, and then on to the director's report.
Very short report. Hopefully you noticed the employment numbers there at your place setting. Really excited to see that American had a 17.52% increase in the month of October over the prior year at the same time. Similarly, United is up 12.66. And year to date for that month, we're up 11.28. So that's really encouraging that our efforts are working. Also wanted to bring to your attention, if you have watched KEYT, you might have seen our Depart Differently commercial that comes on. What makes it kind of unique is there's no real talking going on. It's just music and the airport. So if you haven't caught it, watch KEYT. Also, holiday performances once again are going to be held in the terminal on December 14th. We have local schools doing performances for us. This will be 6th year, I think, that we've done that. So if you have time on the 14th in the afternoon, drop by and take advantage of that. As you probably know, too, for, I guess, right before Thanksgiving, we relocated the employees that were parking in the long-term lot to Lot 2, and we started shuttling because we had the need to free up that space for holiday traffic. And I'm not sure that some passengers might also have been transferred parking in Lot 2 over Thanksgiving. So that kind of illustrates with the increased number in passengers the real need for parking. The employees will be in Lot 2 until early January after the holiday. As mentioned earlier on at council meeting on November 21, council reported out of closed session regarding a settlement agreement that was negotiated between the city of Santa Barbara and Ampersand. And the settlement agreement allows for a smooth transition of that lease coming back to the airport after a 50-year period. So we will have possession on May 9, 2018. The current owner of Ampersand would maintain a corporate hangar spot in the facility and pay the airport $30,000 a month for that location. Just to let you know, that was done, and we've been working on that for about 6 months, so pleased to report that. The master plan, we have the environmental document, which was approved by, or recommended for approval by Planning Commission in August. It was appealed by the City of Goleta. Council's going to hear that on December 12th in the afternoon. Then we'll know whether or not the master plan's adopted, certification is done with the EIR, or if it's delayed again. Also, 6100 Hollister Avenue, there is a lawsuit between the city and Goleta regarding the environmental document for that project. But we have been given, council has given approval for staff to go forward with building design, and we've done the design, we've done the permitting, and now we're out to bid. And we anticipate getting bids either the end of December or perhaps early January, depending on the schedule. And one last thing, I'd like Jeff just to give you a little update on the solar project. It's been a long time coming, as well as you know. That goes back to the design of the terminal, I think.
It does prior to the design of the terminal, actually. We do have a contractor that is working on the project. They've submitted for design review, have also been to ABR one time with their kind of preliminary design. And they're also working to extend the California Solar Initiative incentives that'll help finance part of the project, just a small part. But that's where they are. They're still working on the design, kind of the overall design of the system and how the system's going to look. So that's where they are.
So with that, unless there are other questions, that concludes my report.
I would like to thank your social media folks for getting the Fly Differently or Depart Differently commercial posted up there on
So you could see
YouTube
it.
and Facebook, so we didn't have to spend our day watching for that commercial to pop up.
I have, Hazel, I have a couple of questions on 495. So there was a settlement, so I presume then there was litigation prior to that? Or
Potential litigation.
Potential litigation, okay. And so as part of that settlement, I know that facility is still operating on, or some part of it on temporary power. How did that wind up getting sorted out, or did it?
The airport is, in order to protect our reversionary interest, thank you. The airport is undertaking the replacement of the switchgear and the electrical system. That has been underway for a couple of months now, and it too is getting ready to go out to bid. But because it is in the floodway, not the floodplain, but the floodway, we're building a structure to get it up out of the floodway, so it'll be up at least, I think he said almost 4 feet. And have a new electrical switchgear, and we're working with Smith Electric, Southern California Edison, and we'll be going to City Council to use policy reserves in our capital fund for that project, which is estimated to be around maybe $450,000.
That was going to be my very next question, is that I don't recall us having that budgeted anywhere, so.
Additionally, we're also doing core samples of the ramp because in our AIP grant application for next year, we do have some monies identified for 3 projects, actually. One is to replace one of the ARF vehicles. Another is to replace our security access control system. And then the third one would be to begin replacing ramp in the northeast quadrant of the airport. So the northeast quadrant is pretty much that particular ramp. There has been some questions too as to why the airport didn't repair the ramp in the past. And back in 1963, I believe it was, there was an amendment to the original agreement with Aerospace Lines that said that if they wanted it to be exclusive use, then the responsibility for the maintenance and the upkeep of the ramp would stay with that tenant. And they chose to do that. So it's always been exclusive. It's never been a public ramp until now. And so now we're going to get it and repair it.
Do we have on the electric, I mean, the ramp, that's a long-term thing, I'm sure, in bits and pieces. Bits and pieces, yeah. The electric, which is probably inconvenient for the folks over there, nonetheless, is FedEx, who's about to enjoy their busiest time of the year. That's not a short-term project. I mean, is that will that begin before this 5/19/2018 date, or?
Hopefully, we will have the design, and I don't know, Jeff, if you can echo it in here. I think the design gets done, and then it takes 4 to 5 months to build the switchgear. Is that right?
Right, it's custom design and will have to be custom constructed, so 4 to 5 month lead time on just the switchgear.
Okay.
So we really don't anticipate having the power back up in May.
Understood.
It could be longer than that.
Yeah, understood. How is the temporary power worked over there? I mean, is it stayed up? I mean,
I understand that there are 2 tenants that have generators, and they rotate them out and keep them going.
we certainly want to keep FedEx happy.
Well, FedEx and Georgetown Management has the other one too.
Right.
Mhm.
I'm curious, is that not an issue with the Air Pollution Control District? mean,
I
there's
believe
such-
they have permits.
I
Do
see.
they?
If the units are portable units, they can run as many hours as they need to.
Is that right? Oh. Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks. I don't have any other questions. Anybody else have any questions? All right, then with that, it's been a long night. We're adjourned.
Thank you.